I declare war. So I'm back. I had to do this again. I want to do this again. So you all have to bear with me. Sorry that I had to restart this particular hangout. But I wanted to talk about this Clarence Thomas situation. A few days ago, there was a hearing before the Supreme Court, and Clarence Thomas broke his silence. Like usually he's silent during these hearings before the Supreme Court, these arguments before the Supreme Court. The last time he spoke out was back in 2016. And according to the articles that I read, when before he spoke out in 2016, this guy went a whole decade without saying anything during Supreme Court hearings. And we'll talk a little bit later about why he doesn't speak during these Supreme Court hearings. But let's get right into this particular article. So let me share my screen with you all real quick. Just bear with me a second. So I'm going to go through this article, summarize some points from this article, and then I'm going to provide my commentary. So this article talks about how for the first 55 minutes of the Supreme Court case, when the case was being argued, it seemed like all the justices were on the same page. They were going to conclude that the defendant's constitutional rights were violated. Here we have a situation where you have this prosecutor from Mississippi who basically did everything that he could to keep Black people off the jury. That's exactly what he did. And I'm going to go through, the numbers and all that kind of stuff in a second. But that's the situation. You have this prosecutor, this white prosecutor, who did everything that he could to keep Black jurors off of this murder case where you have a Black defendant. And there's a case called Batson versus Kentucky, which basically says that violates the Equal Protection Clause. You can't strike jurors based solely on their race. And basically, the defense in this case is arguing that this prosecutor violated Batson by excluding jurors based solely on their race. Now, before I get into what Clarence Thomas said, I'm just going to provide some background information. So this case had like 6 trials. During the first 4 trials that were held between 1997 and 2007, the prosecutor, whose name is Doug Evans, a white man, used all of his peremptory challenges to exclude Black jurors, to strike Black jurors. And basically, these challenges are challenges where you can just strike a juror for any reason. However, you can't strike somebody, again, based solely on their race. So this man basically used these challenges to get rid of Black jurors. So he struck all these Black jurors, used all 36 of his challenges to strike Black jurors from serving on a jury. And then, this article points out that those 3 trials ended in convictions that were reversed on appeal, and there was 1 mistrial. Also, this article points out how for the 5th trial, they don't have the racial makeup of the jury pool. And, this article also pointed out how Mississippi courts ruled twice against this particular prosecutor, saying that he violated that case of Batson versus Kentucky. Now, there's another trial that he had, and I'm going to get right to that, the 6th trial, where during that trial, he accepted 1 Black juror and he struck the next 5 potential Black jurors. The article also talks about how he questioned Black jurors very closely. For instance, he asked them 29 questions each. But when it came to the white jurors, he only asked them one question. So here you have a situation where you had this white prosecutor basically excluding black jurors from a case on many occasions through many trials, basically making sure that you had as few black people as possible on that particular jury. And here we're talking about a case where there's a black defendant. And here you have this justice. And then before I get into what Clarence Thomas said, let me just say this. You know, according to this article, they're saying that the Supreme Court seem to be on the same page. You know, most of the justices, even the conservative justices, seem likely to rule that jury selection was marred by unconstitutional race discrimination in this most recent trial involving the defendant, Curtis Flowers. Even a conservative justice like Alito said the whole situation was unusual and really disturbing, you know, describing this prosecutor's actions in terms of excluding these black jurors. And we're talking about a conservative white justice who said this. But here you have Uncle Thomas, who instead of like really trying to hammer down on this issue of whether or not this prosecutor engaged in discriminatory behavior by excluding black jurors, this man turned the tables and focused on the defense. So he asked the defense if they excluded any jurors. And then he asked the defense what was the race of those jurors. So the defense said, yeah, they excluded jurors. And then they said the race of the jurors was white. So basically you have Clarence Thomas not concerned about all those black jurors that were excluded, not expressing any kind of concern or raising any questions about that, about all those 36-something jurors excluded, black jurors. Instead, he wants to focus on a few white jurors that were excluded. And that just tells you how messed up his priorities are. It just tells you that this guy went all the way out of his way to tap dance, to buck dance, to shoe shine, and basically sell out. Because even the conservatives were agreeing in this particular case that there was racial discrimination here. And this guy wants to focus on what the defense counsel was doing. And one thing that has to be pointed out is his silence. You know, he's the only black justice on the Supreme Court. As you all know, he replaced Thurgood Marshall. And as you know, Thurgood Marshall fought for civil rights as a civil rights attorney, and then as a judge and a justice. He was progressive, fighting for civil rights of all people. But he was replaced with this conservative, a black man who is silent in the courtroom when all these important cases come up, cases involving civil rights, cases impacting the black community. This man is silent when these hearings take place. And then the few times when this man speaks up, like in this situation, he doesn't speak up on behalf of black people or to express his concern about his fellow African Americans. Instead, he expresses concern about white people who don't give a damn about him. You know, and one thing that has to be talked about is like, you know, this article points out like some of the reasons why he's silent. And one of the biggest reasons, you know, that they point out is that this man was self-conscious of the way he talks. He's from Georgia. And from what I understand, he may be from the Gullah people, if I'm not mistaken. So he speaks with an accent. You know, his normal way of speaking would be with an accent, but he's done everything in his power to suppress his accent so that he could blend in and be accepted and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of the reason why he's reluctant to speak out, even though now he doesn't even speak with an accent or anything like that. But I think that he's still self-conscious about the way he talks and all that kind of stuff. He's still conscious of trying to suppress who he is, you know, to suppress his real identity and stuff as an African American growing up in Georgia and all that kind of stuff. You know, in his autobiography, as this article points out, this man was reluctant to ask questions in law school and all that kind of stuff as well because of the same reason. And, you know, this article points out a couple of other reasons why he doesn't raise questions. Let me see if I can get to those real quick. So they said in recent years, he mostly said he doesn't ask questions out of simple courtesy. So that's his excuse now, you know, that he's doing it out of courtesy. He wants to just hear what the people have to say. And I guess he's trying to be courteous, he claims, to his fellow jurors and all that kind of stuff. I mean, not jurors, justices. Yeah, so I mean, I just think that this is despicable, man. I mean, here you have a case involving an African American man who's facing a potential death penalty, from what I understand. And you have a situation where he's being denied justice because black jurors are not being able to serve on this particular jury. The numbers are being reduced, you know, because you have a prosecutor who's deliberately excluding jurors. And instead of like focusing on that violation of rights, you know, he wants to turn the tables and focus on the prosecution. So anyway, I just felt the need to share this article with you. Let me stop sharing my screen. I want to see if people are chiming in before I sign out. Yeah, I want to thank people for tuning in. Yeah, so Big Game, shout out to Big Game. Big Game said it's normal. You know, black people are always over scrutinized. And yeah, I mean, that's true, but it's just crazy. It just shows the bias here. Here you had this man excluding all these jurors, you know, in all these trials. And then when it comes to the sixth trial, he puts a token Negro on the jury, but then he strikes the next five. And, you know, when it comes to questioning the potential jurors, he has all these tough questions for the black jurors, but then he only has one question for the white jurors. And, you know, hopefully the Supreme Court will rule that this was an unconstitutional violation of Batson versus Kentucky. But it's just a shame that you had Clarence Thomas, like, even though he's silent during these hearings, he does speak when he actually writes his opinions and his, you know, his decisions and all that kind of stuff. And when he does speak in writing, it's to the detriment of black people. And, you know, this is just another prime example of just how important elections are, because he was appointed by George Bush. You know, that again reminds you that who the president is matters, because these presidents appoint judges not only on the Supreme Court, but on the lower federal courts as well. So yeah, I just wanted to hop on here real quick and share my thoughts about this. Tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.